Time now for breathing lessons with Susan Kaye, helping you learn how to breathe and release those beliefs that have been binding you so you can just enjoy life and breathe easy. Breathing lessons with Susan Kaye.
Hi, this is Susan Kaye, and I'm back on the record with breathing lessons. Today, I want to just kind of go back to some thoughts about orphan culture, because it's been a while since we've talked about it. Orphan culture is when we don't feel connected. We don't feel connected to people. We do not feel connected to God. We do not feel connected to ourselves. Most of our Western civilization, if that's what you want to call it, has really adopted orphan culture as how we live. We vicariously live through other people, other people's experience, and we aren't grown up. We don't grow up with this idea of autonomy, sovereignty, and a lot of this has to do with the Christian culture or the religious cultures in America. It could be Christian, it could be Mormon, it could be Seventh-day Adventist, it could be whatever, whatever the label is. It's still about the fact that we are not sovereign beings and that we are separate from God and that we are separate from one another. And all of this lends itself to all kinds of beliefs in enemies, in external conscience, and what we live externally is what matters, not what we're living internally. So today I'm wearing all kinds of stuff, which I don't usually do, but today I'm wearing earrings that were made by a grandchild. Thank you, Wynn. I'm wearing a necklace given to me by my son. Thank you, honey. Same with this is from my daughter. I'm wearing bracelets that my sister made me. Thank you, Peg. And I'm wearing rings that my husband gave me. So, and I did all this for a reason, and that is because I want to show belonging. When it comes to changing the way that our society is living and going from separation, I call it separation theology or orphan culture, into a different mode of being, which is a being of connection and of being. It takes a lot of work and a lot of awakening. And I use that word not as some woo-woo word, but it's just the truth of we have to wake up and understand that the way we are living is not healthy. It's not going to get us to a place of peace and kindness and compassion. So in the last video, I believe I talked about this book. This is a book that I read when I came out of the church. About 2010, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there, I found this book. I don't necessarily agree with everything that's in the book, but I do love his definition, and this is Dr. David R. Hawkins, of the energy pyramid. I'm calling it that. He didn't call it that. That shows you what we live in as the lowest energy to the highest energy. So I'm going to put this out here because, so the life view, so the levels. So we start with the level of shame and guilt. And the reason I'm connecting these two is because power versus force. Force is that controlling power. It's not power really, it is force. And it's that which controls other people, circumstances. It's that grinding feeling that we get when we're trying to make something happen that we can't make happen, or we're going to demand that it happens, or we're going to demand that people be who we want them to be. That's force. Power is very unique and a very reliant on the self. Power is that which we stand in inherently, but we don't know it. Power is our sovereignty. Power is our ability to connect. And so I'm not going to get into this too deeply, except for in this power grid, where we see what is the lowest energy you can be in, and what we move through to find higher energy, a higher frequency, to live in love and compassion and kindness and make our world a better world. The bottom half of this is all orphan culture. I grew up in orphan culture, specifically fundamental Christianity, which is extreme orphan culture. And I know what I'm talking about. So the first level that we look at when it comes to the low level of energy, the low level of frequency that you live in, is the lowest level you can really live in and still be alive and breathing, is shame. Shame is a very important subject because we all experience it. We all have parts of ourselves in it. I think that our everybody's genealogy has been shaped by it. There's always things, the things in the closet in the back of our family tree, things that maybe our family has done, or things that our family didn't do, or just secrets that families adopt along the way. But shame can be more present than that. For me, shame was an everyday presence in my life growing up, because I was taught that I was not good. I was inherently bad. I won't say evil, but bad. And that I was nothing but a sinner. And that the only way that I could achieve any goodness was to give my whole life over to someone else who would take sovereignty over my life and clean me up. And this is touted as a really good thing, but the truth is, it is built in shame and guilt, and the feeling that I was not born good enough, I never will be good enough, no matter what I do, it's never going to be enough. So shame is the level we're talking about here. When it comes to shame, the view of God is called despising. God despises us. He has nothing to do with, he created us, but then because we blew it somewhere in the garden, he absolutely despises us and wants us to toe the line in obedience and sacrifice, and in order for us to get anywhere near him. And that it always takes bloodletting in order for us to achieve this. I've been writing my book. I've been writing it for a long time. I totally erased the second half of it because I didn't like it, but I am writing it. The first half talks about all of this and why bloodshed is important to the Christian and how it works out in our culture and what it looks like moving even away from Christianity but into our subculture of American nationalism, or whatever you want to call it. But I won't get into that now. But God despises us, and in order for us to even get close to him, he's had to just kill. He's had to kill. He's had to kill animals. He's had to kill a man. He had to kill a man. The next thing, the life view of someone who lives in shame is that their lives are just simply miserable. And I forgot to turn this on, so I maybe go over a little time. So life is miserable. Your life is not supposed to be happy. Your life is not supposed to be pleasant. Your life is going to be miserable. I don't know if you remember in the story of the garden, once they sinned, then, the earth became thorns and thistles, and the man had to struggle to produce anything from the ground. And the woman had to bear children in pain and misery. And they were abandoned, and they were exiled from God in the garden. And so everything about their lives became miserable. They had to call on God, who was way out there somewhere, but was not clear in them. God was totally not in them. He was outside of them, and he was far away now. The emotion for shame is one of humiliation. And if you grew up in shame and you could speak fluent shame, like I can, but I don't, you understand the idea of feeling humiliated. Shame makes us put our heads down. We don't look people in the eye. We skulk around hoping nobody notices us, because if they do, they're going to notice that there's something wrong with me. And I think a lot of this is why we have body dysmorphia. I think we have, people who quit eating, people who are on drugs, people who abuse other people because they're so shamed in life and they don't know how to navigate life without feeling like there's something totally wrong with them, which creates a lot of pain and anger. The process of shame. So we have the God view of shame, which is despising. We have the life view of shame, which is being miserable. Then we have the emotion of shame, which is a humiliation. And we have now the process of what does the process look like then of living out shame, and it's the process of elimination. It's kind of a funny story, but my mother lived in this process of elimination the whole time. She was alive for 97 years on this earth. And I always remember her talking about what God was taking away from her. One of the things she liked to do was chew gum. And chewing gum was a tell for us. If my mother was chewing gum, you needed to stay clear because she was actually chewing on something. But the bottom line was that it was her way of working out tension, because she'd just chew this gum. And in her latter years, one day she announced to me, God has taken gum away from me. It sounds funny. I want to laugh about it, but it's not funny because, she couldn't do anything. Everything she did was wrong, including chewing gum. And so, quote unquote, God took it away, but then I noticed God must have given it back, because pretty soon here she is chewing gum again. That is a ridiculous illustration, but you will find this. One of the books I read, and I cannot remember the name of it, but it was written by a gentleman by the name of Frank Schaeffer. His mother and father had this highly spiritualized Christian institution or retreat, or I don't know what you'd call it, but it was in Switzerland, and they lived over there. And Mr. and Mrs. Schaeffer, Francis Schaeffer was his name, and he was considered quite the theologian and quite the intelligent Christian. And his wife and he would train people in the ways of God or whatever. But this child ended up writing a book about his family and his parents. And one of the things that I noted in the book, even as I think I read it as a post-Christian, after I came out of the church, I thought it was interesting. These two individuals were told by God to give up the very things they loved in life in order to serve God. And God is always requiring that we give up something so that we can serve Him. We, as who we are, have to always constantly be proving ourselves to God and to the society that God is in, which is Christian culture or in orphan culture. Now, this isn't true of just Americans out who are not living in the Christian culture, but it is still, there is a mindset of it, and you can find it out there. But these two individuals, she was a dancer, and God made her give up dance. She could not dance. And Francis Schaeffer, the gentleman, I don't know if he was an artist or he was an art collector or he was an art critic or something along those lines. He loved art and it was his passion, and God made him give those up. as I read the book, I found out later this man was sometimes very abusive to his family. He would get in these moods, and I don't know that he struck people. I can't remember if he struck people or if he just was very verbally abusive. But either way, he became very abusive at times. And the mother was inappropriate with, it appears, with some of the young men that came along. And I'm not telling this to shame them, but just to show you that when we live lives that are soaking in orphan culture and we are not realized as people, what we desire in life becomes askew because we aren't allowing ourselves to go down the path of what is truly in us, and we are being twisted and turned down paths that aren't us, and we end up crooked and twisted. Once I came out of the church and I came out of Christianity, and I do not identify myself as a Christian anymore. I realized that the thing that I most wanted in my life was to be known and to be claimed. I never felt claimed. I never felt known. I never felt seen. And I did not feel loved. And I'm not saying that as poor me or whatever. It's just the result of the theology and the mindset that I came out of. And everyone that I knew felt this way. So how do we get from no one knows me, no one sees me, no one claims me, no one loves me? How do you get past that? Well, I feel like one of the things I did was I studied trees. I studied nature. And I began to watch. I had oak trees, big oak trees around my house. And so I'd sit and look out the window at these oak trees and realize that these oak trees were not well known. In other words, they didn't have to get on YouTube. They had no way of propagating themselves out in the world to be known by people. And yet they flourished. They were grounded, and they received, and they were known. And I recognized that the knownness of nature, whether it was the flowers that I planted or the lizards that would come along and do this funny thing on a wall behind my house, they never worried about any of it. And so because I could study trees, I would go to bed and I would think about being a tree. And the fact that I am just planted and I can grow quietly. And because somewhere along the line I have been known, I am being realized as a tree. I had to get myself out of human form and study this before I could put myself back in human form and decide it was true of me too. I know that's kind of odd, but that's what I did. And trees became my go-to thing. Trees and plants and animals. I began to love animals more and just watch them and know that they were innately who they were. The fish did not have to grow legs and come up on the land to be known. The fish was known in its environment as it was, in its being. The fox was known in its environment, in its being. The rabbit, the elephant, the cow, all of these animals, the dog, the cat, the beetle, the insects, all of those things were just who they were innately, and they were cared for by the very environment they were in, which spoke to me of being known, being claimed because they were cared for, and being loved. And I don't know if that helps you, but today we were just going to talk about shame, what it looks like, and I just want to offer you some thoughts as to how I dealt with a lot of this stuff. I do not feel shamed anymore. I do not speak shame. I do not speak shame to myself. I do not speak shame to others. And that's a big change in my life. I used to speak shame over myself so badly. When I got away from my mother as far as living with her, she was still in my head. And so I would repeat to myself the things my mother would say to me. And I had to realize that the tree does not shame itself. The mother tree does not shame the child tree, and the lizard does not shame the egg, or however I think they hatch. There's no shaming going on in the natural world. We're the only ones that do the shaming because we are the only ones that believe fully and cognitively that we are separate from God, from one another, from the earth, and from ourselves. We are not separate from ourselves. We are not separate from God. Now, you may or may not believe in God, and I don't care. That's totally fine. I don't care whether you believe in God or not. But you have to believe that you are connected to yourself, that you are claimed as of yourself, and that your being, just your being, is so important and it's so vital to the life around you because you are not disconnected from others. You are connected to all things around you. And what you do and how you treat people and how you treat yourself matters. So if you like this video, please like, share, write a comment, or give it to somebody else, whatever. This is Susan Kaye, and today we talked about shame. We're going to call this one Shame in Orphan Culture. And I'll see you next time. We're going to talk about guilt. See you then.
Thanks for watching Susan Kaye today. Subscribe on the button below and be watching for more. Learn how to breathe with Susan Kaye.